Can we please give a massive ba-ba-ba whoop welcome and cheer for Rosie Wilby?
Is. I am loving this. Let's give it up for Tim. So yes, I am going to be talking a bit about breakups, which have been a fascination to me ever since I got dumped a few years ago by email. What do we think about that? I did feel much better about it though once I'd corrected her spelling. And punctuation. And changed the font. I think you'll find Breakup in wingdings is far preferable. So yes, I am Rosie Wilby. I'm a comedian and author of this book, Breakup Monologues, that is out now. And you can see the subtitle is The Unexpected Joy of Heartbreak, because it sort of looks at the opportunities that can come after this horrible time of a breakup where we sort of reinvent ourselves and transform ourselves. But really, what I'm going to be talking about this evening is my other fascination, a question that may actually indeed lead to a breakup. And it's the title of my first book and a comedy show that led to that, which was called Is Monogamy Dead? And this comedy show and book were inspired when I heard that in many surveys, around 50% of people confess to cheating. So I thought, if you are in a monogamous relationship and you're not cheating, better look closely at your partner. Simple math says it has got to be them. I don't know why I pointed at you then. Apologies. But cheer if you are in relationships. Sort of more over that side, more booing over here. Not going so well over here. And so, because I've done this trilogy of comedy shows all about the psychology of love and relationships, and looking at some of the serious stuff as well as trying to have some fun, of course, as well, I have become a bit obsessed and fascinated at looking out at the body language between people who are together in the audience. I love the body language between people where there's one partner who's much taller than the other. I find myself fascinated thinking, did their eyes meet across a seesaw? And height difference is scientifically interesting, because I don't know if you know this, men often go for a woman who's shorter, women go for a man who's taller, even in heterosexual relationships. But did you know in the queer world, these desires actually carry over, and it's quite hard for a short lesbian like me to catch the eye of a slightly taller lesbian, because she's looking for tall lesbian, and that carries on and on. In an endless spiral, and in some ways it's quite good that two gay people can't actually create a baby together, because, think about it, runaway evolutionary theory would mean that lesbians would evolve and get taller and taller and taller and taller and taller and taller, and gay men would get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So we couldn't possibly all coexist in the same society, could we? It would be ridiculous. People would be like, oh, the lesbians are coming, run away. Gonna crush us with their giant Dr. Martin boots. Pick up that little teeny tiny gay man, he can't run very fast. With those tiny legs. I haven't always been open about being gay. I mean, when I was growing up, up in Ormskirk, where I grew up, I don't know if anyone's heard of this place. Yeah, yes, I know, it's terrible, isn't it? I always say it's a bit near Liverpool, it's a bit like Liverpool if you take away everything. And so the only lesbian I knew was Martina Navratilova, and I didn't think I was good enough at tennis. But when I came out to my parents, I did it on April Fool's Day. So I thought I'd have a good get out if they didn't like it. Turns out they did. They were excited, like, ooh, our daughter's done something interesting. I was the one who was all inhibited. But they started getting excited, and then we're like, ooh, started telling the neighbours, handing out flyers, printing up t-shirts, trying to get us all on Kilroy. My mum tried to tell me something about her and her friend Joan on holiday. Which I didn't want to hear, it was disgusting. But even though I am a mere silly comedian most of the time in my professional life, I do kind of fancy myself, now I've done some actual serious reading and research about love and relationships and how they work, I fancy myself as a bit of a sex researcher, inspired by the likes of Kinsey, of course, and also these two, Masters and Johnson, who among many discoveries were the first people to tell us that for a woman to have an orgasm, a penis is not necessary, a discovery that I think she looks slightly happier about. photograph of them. And so I decided, when I was researching my Is Monogamy Dead comedy show a few years ago, I was going to do my own sex research study online of just 100 people, because that's how many you can do for free. And I wanted to find out what sort of relationships people were having on a sort of monogamy, polyamory kind of scale. And yeah, I had most of the people who responded said they were monogamous. Cheer if you're monogamous. And I mean,
don't be shy.
the meaning of it has changed though, hasn't it? I mean, it's complicated. I actually think it's less universal than we necessarily think. We'll come on to that in a minute. But, you know, originally it came from the Greek, monos gamos, meaning one marriage for life. Whereas we live such long lives now, we've altered the meaning, haven't we, to mean sort of one marriage at a time. We're more serially monogamous. And I had some people answering the survey who were polyamorous, having multiple ethical, honestly, consciously declared relationships. Do we have any people in who are polyamorous? They're usually at the back, actually. They're very busy. They're snuck in late, usually. They've got so many partners. But, no, excellent. And what I particularly love about my friends who are poly is that a lot of them are inventing new language to define the new ways that we can have relationships. Because our language around love and relationships is so restrictive, isn't it? We've got this one word, love, where the Greeks had so many different types of love. We've got this one that means so many different things. I mean, I love my girlfriend and I love chocolate. And one of those is an insatiable craving that never goes away. And one of those is how I feel about my girlfriend. But my favourite one of these new words that I've heard about new types of relationships is, if you are poly and you feel you've reached your threshold of partners, you can say that you're polysaturated. Which I particularly like. And now we also had some people, what I did feel a bit sad about was the couple of people who were polyamorous but currently single. I thought that's a bit depressing, isn't it? You set out going, I'm going to have loads of relationships. I still can't even find one. But we also had some people who were in an open relationship, which was a structure really familiar to me because many of my gay male friends tend to have a primary partnership that they're really committed to for decades and decades and decades, and maybe have a looser sexual arrangement, more casual and secondary partners outside of that, and it's all very honest and respectful and in many cases works really, really successfully. And so in many studies, you do find that gay men report having the most sexual activity outside a relationship, lesbians having the least. Obviously, our spectrums of sexuality and gender are now much more complex than this, but these are sort of quite old studies before we started to wise up a little bit. And what's really interesting that alongside this is we do see lesbians actually breaking up more frequently. So maybe an open relationship is a pretty healthy strategy. And actually these rates of separations have diverged even more. Now that we have same-sex marriage, we see lesbians divorcing at a rate of over 4 times the rate of separations and dissolutions between gay men. So perhaps it kind of busts some of these cultural myths that we have about female sexuality and about women being the sort of guardians of long-term monogamy, which was one of the ideas behind a book that I read during the time I was researching the show by a guy called Daniel Bergner, which was called What Do Women Want? Because of course we do need a man to tell us. I'm not sure what these photographs are. I think it's a woman just before and after filling in her tax return. Yeah, pretty sure what that is. But I started to think that, you know, maybe monogamy, female sexuality are kind of stories that we tell about relationships and love are full of assumptions and myths and secrets and lies. So that made me want to ask my survey respondents, what other secrets do you keep from one another, apart from sexual secrets and affairs? And my favourite one of these was the third one down. Giving yourself the best portion of food. Does anyone do that? Yes, you hand right up there, yes, absolutely. But I came to think, after all of this research, thinking about relationships and love, was that if you are going to choose monogamy, and I believe that you can actively choose monogamy. I am now in a monogamous relationship much more happily than I ever was, knowing that there are alternatives out there and having loosely experimented with those alternatives and thinking actually monogamy is okay if I can talk about it and frame it in a way that I understand and my partner understands, and we have an honest, open discussion about what those boundaries are. I think you can actively choose it if you can answer the final question to my survey, which was, in a monogamous relationship, what counts as infidelity? Is it universal? We kind of assume it is. I don't think so, because I think you'll find that a lot of people have different answers to these questions. And so let's sort of do, by way of cheers and hands up, what we think in the room tonight. In a monogamous relationship, what counts as infidelity? Do you think having sex with someone else counts? Yes. Yeah, particularly over this side again, isn't it? Yeah. And so, yeah, 94% of my respondents said having sex with somebody else. I mean, having sex is still, you know, it's ambiguous anyway, isn't it? It's still woolly, isn't it? I mean, we're not all Bill Clinton. Now, one person who answered this actually put in the comments box, in a car. I like that made a difference. I don't really understand what that was. And then we had kissing somebody else. How many people cheer if you think kissing somebody else counts as cheating? Yes, you're quite definite about that over there. And so, yes, 76% of people said that wasn't far behind. But then it gets interesting because we move away from a sort of physical spectrum of monogamy and what your partner actually does to a more emotional spectrum of what your partner is thinking and feeling, which surely is much harder to control or police. And so we had falling in love with someone else without sexual contact. How many people think that that would count as cheating? Oh yeah, was that you? Very deep voice. I think I might go straight. And so that was really not far behind, 73% of people. And then we had some behaviours that come under the banner of micro-cheating, and now sort of text and email flirting. How many people think that? Yes. So 62% of people said that. And this next one was a bit of a controversial one, staying up all night talking to someone else. This one caused a lot of discussion and debate. 31% of people said that. And then we had masturbating, and I was thinking, come on. What do you think? No. So, but some people, like, look, 14% of people thought that would count as cheating. I mean, people do tend to answer it very differently, whether they're, you know, in the room or at home masturbating. No, it's definitely not cheating. And then we had fantasizing about somebody else. Anyone think that? 7% of people said that. And then we had looking at porn alone. What was that? Tractors? Well, whatever turns you on, isn't it? That's the point. Now, 4% of people said that. Now, one time I had to do a kind of child-friendly version of this talk, if you can imagine such a thing. It lasted about 2 minutes. And the organiser of the event had changed that last one, looking at porn alone, to looking at naughty pictures, sometimes moving. Of course, everyone thought that that meant they were emotionally moving and they're telling a lovely story. Now, I think what I'm going to do is just read a tiny section of the first book, Is Monogamy Dead? But I will just go to the final slide, which is the Breakup Monologues book, because that's the new one that you all must go and buy from lovely Lee at Printed Matter over there. It's a local bookshop that you really must support. But I'm just going to find the chapter that I'd quite like to read out. Would you like to just hear briefly about what happened when I went, for research purposes, of course, to the lesbian sauna? Yes, you're very definite over here, weren't you? I'd been too much of a monogamous prude to realise, but lesbians are sometimes allowed to have casual sex. Once every 2 months, apparently. Because that's how frequently the Locker Room, a gay sauna just off South London's leafy and affluent Cleaver Square, is hijacked, by the women. Now that I was writing a show on sex and fidelity, I could visit under the comforting guise of research. I'd been told tales of wild excess about what went on there behind the clouds of steam and sweat by gay male friends. Would women behave with similar animalistic abandon? I heard about the sporadic women's event through my friend Belle, who described herself as solo poly, and explained this as engaging in multiple ethically non-exclusive relationships while abandoning the hierarchical structure of a primary relationship. Wow. Although she cared very much for her lovers and friends, her key commitment was to herself and her own path. To remind herself of this, she wore a single wedding ring around her neck on a chain. She'd effectively married herself. To her, a lesbian sauna was no big deal. She had nobody to report her whereabouts to, and the partner she was with would totally get it anyway. Belle and I agreed not to cramp one another's style. I would leave her to her own devices or vices. Yet if I was in any way uncomfortable, I was to go and discreetly belch in her ear. It was the most ridiculous safe word ever. I wasn't even sure I could belch on demand, yet she had once heard a friend and his wife using it as a code, and the idea had tickled her enough to copy it. An amiable, bespectacled butch, who seemed to be in charge, proposed an icebreaker game in the cramped bar upstairs, even though most of us were still clothed and sipping milky tea from polystyrene cups. There was a giggly frisson, the airless space rich with pheromones. The butch clapped her hands like a PE mistress rounding up her girls, and explained, we must speak to the person next to us. Then when she rang a little bell, switch our attention to somebody else. I inquired if the bell system would be employed later on. This got a big laugh. I could have happily gone home then. But then, a slender-toned woman a few years my senior strutted over. I'm Helen, she purred, fluttering eyelashes thick with mascara, briny-grey curls cascading round long earrings, droplets of silver pointing down to her glistening neck and chest. Rosie, I said, instinctively offering a handshake, a formal and robust greeting to legitimise what might follow. What do you want to do tonight? Oh, God, I hadn't prepared for this question. I thought to myself, I wouldn't mind an intelligent discussion on Britain's role in the European Union. Instead, I gulped. I looked over at Belle, wondered if I could employ our code this early into the evening. The fear gripped me I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. Mum's friend Monica had once asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. How can you answer? How does anyone know? This was the same. If I say spanking, just for the hell of it, she might say, I'm into that, let's go. I might have to go through with it, just out of politeness. Fortunately, the bell rang. A pretty Asian femme, barely half my age, whirled around to catch my eye, long painted fingernails giving her sexual tourism away. You look like a film star, she proclaimed. Thanks, I said. Which one? I don't know, she laughed. This was immediately more comfortable to me than the first situation with Helen. This girl clearly had no idea what she was doing, which meant I wouldn't be exposed as not knowing what I was doing either. Once we descended to the steamy, dimly lit basement, a blonde woman started nonchalantly flicking through the pages of a magazine. A strange mix of aloof and slutty, she pulled down her bikini top to rest under her breasts. Then, in a moment of OCD, started folding towels and tidying. This was hardly the hedonistic gangbang I'd anticipated. I imagine reporting back to my friend Don, the one person I told where I was in case I died. What happened, he'd say. Nothing, I'd say. But then, the Asian girl leaned forward from the bench above and whispered, let's do something. Silently, I took her hand and led her out to the shower. After being in the cosy cocoon of the sauna, however, emerging into the drafty corridor felt like stepping into a blizzard naked. How do gay men cope with this temperature change? We turned on the shower and tried to kiss under its dribbly warmth, but it was on a timer. The water kept stopping. Let's go to the steam room, she suggested, not to be defeated. Well, the steam room was insanely hot, like climbing inside a kettle. There's no way to be able to stay in there long enough to make a woman orgasm. That shit takes time. We started kissing awkwardly like kids playing spin the bottle. Then, as the steam parted, I saw a familiar face. Oh, who's that, I thought. Oh, God, she's a regular at my gigs who often tweets me afterwards with not entirely welcome feedback. I imagined her this time, judging me, holding up a scorecard. Hi, Rosie. Hi, I blurted, sitting upright. And we all started chatting, as women do, then went upstairs for another cup of milky tea.